So where were you 50 years ago? Hi world, it's the 16th of November 2025 and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon UK time, and I'm recording this as Saturn is rising on my local horizon. And as I speak, there is an amazing grand trine in the sky. Saturn is at 25 1/4 degrees of Pisces. Jupiter is at 25.0 of Cancer, and the Sun is at 24.5 degrees of Scorpio. So over the next 24 hours, this grand trine is going to be at its strongest. Now, I'm not a fan of grand trines. Grand trines bring ease and comfort. They bring opportunity. They bring flow of energy. Lovely. Especially if you're born sort of 5 days before the end of Scorpio, Cancer or Pisces. You know, around the 16th of March or July, 17th of July or 16th, 17th of November. But I do think that trines make you lazy. Squares and oppositions are much harder work, but they force you into effort. Anyway, that's another subject. I'm part of the punk generation. People like Dee Dee Ramone, Joe Strummer from The Clash, Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. They were all born within 6 months of me. And it's 50 years ago punk started. The Sex Pistols had their first gig on November the 3rd, 1975. 50 years ago. And I was still in the army in that time, November 75, and I was just about to leave. Under a cloud, but there you go. Because I remember in March, April 1976, I was in a town called Cleethorpes on the northeast coast of England. And because I was bored, I was working on a boat, trucking across the North Sea to Antwerp. It was my uncle's boat, and I'm convinced he was smuggling a few things, but, you know, I didn't last long on that because I was a bit too cheeky for him. But anyway, that's another story. I found myself overnight in Grimsby and Cleethorpes. And I thought, oh, there's a really good venue down the road. It's called Cleethorpes Winter Gardens. It's famous for hosting concerts. I'll go down there and see what's on. And I went there, and it was punk night. And this was in March, April 76. And they hosted, there was the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Damned. Now, if you know anything of punk history, these are iconic. To my mind, the Clash and the Ramones, even more than the Pistols, are the epitome of punk, along with Patti Smith. And I don't remember much of it. I wasn't into punk at that stage. It wasn't until about 3 months later, when Anarchy in the UK was released, I suddenly thought, oh, this is interesting. And then 6 months after that, God Save the Queen came out, and that was it. I was hooked. The point of this is that 50 years ago this month, the Sex Pistols formed their first gig. Also, 50 years ago, not quite today, but 50 years ago on Tuesday of this coming week, on the 18th of November 1975, I knew exactly where I was. It's a date that will remain etched in my memory for the rest of my life. I knew I was going to be leaving the army. I left the army a month later, as I say, under a cloud for reasons I'm not going to go into publicly, but it did involve getting caught doing something I shouldn't have been doing. I found myself 50 years ago on Tuesday at Hammersmith Odeon in the West End of London. And a friend of mine had bought us tickets to go and see someone who's playing their first ever gig outside of America. Someone who there'd been a lot of hype and spin about in the previous 6 weeks. And I just thought, well, I'm being given a free ticket, why not? So on the 18th of November 1975 in the Hammersmith Odeon of London, I went to watch the first ever outside of America performance by a character called Bruce Springsteen. He played for 4.25 hours and did 7 encores. It's one of those things that live with you for the rest of your life. This is why, because of my heritage, if you like, I was too young to be a hippie, but too old to be a punk, but I gravitated towards punks more than hippies. Patti Smith and Bruce Springsteen are perhaps the only rock and rollers, and I do not include the heavy metal bands, but they're the only ones who never sold out. They never advertised anything. They never allowed their music to be sold for advertising. They maintained integrity, dignity, and above all else, authenticity. A lot of people, well, myself included, because I've done a couple of videos on it in the last year, are remarking how similar the astrological energy of this time is to that of the start of World War II. And indeed, you know, Uranus has an 84-year orbit. Go back 84 years, we're at the end of 1941. Saturn, the Saturn return is about 86, 87 years, the third Saturn return, and that puts us at the start of World War II. So Saturn and Uranus are in very similar positions to where they were at the start of World War II. Neptune and Pluto are in very similar positions in the opposite of where they were at the start of World War II. So, yeah, on the one hand, the world is in a position at the moment where the memories of World War II, there's a similar energy, not the same, but a similar energy to the start of World War II, where you're getting dictators blindsiding the local population by spinning anything they can to avoid looking at the reality, whether it be in America or Russia or the UK. The hype and spin and the bovine scatology that's going on to stop people actually seeing what's really happening. It's going to get worse in the next couple of weeks. There's some massive secrets about to come out in this next couple of weeks. But it's not only the 84 to 86 year thing that's going on back to the start of World War II. I started this talking about the punk and Bruce Springsteen because 50 years on, almost a Chiron return, 50 and a half, the whole world of culture and popular music is going through a bit of a seismic shift, where again, a lot of hype and spin and sham and superficiality of recent times is now being rejected, particularly by the youth. In 1975 in Britain, we were having a 3-day week. The lights were off for 4 days a week. The factories had closed down because there was no electricity. There was something like 8 million unemployed. But, 10%, 12%, 15% of the population were unemployed. And that was mainly youth. And that gave birth to punk. The disrest, the unrest, the disenchantment. And I suspect that it's similar now. Not for the unemployed, not for money, but there's so many people now on sickness benefit because they feel disenchanted. If this is all that they're being offered, the nature of a job and to toe the line, some things don't change. And so there is some type of big breakthrough coming, and that fits with the astrology of these times. There is a case for saying that the astrology immediately at the start of World War II and then again in the mid-50s, and then again in the early mid-60s, and then again in 98, 99, 2000, with a brief blip in 2012. It's all been steps on the way to 25, 26. And, as I said in my lecture the other night, we are heading into, very shortly now, the most intense the most intense period of concentrated and compressed change in human history. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, and we'll get past the date of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and people will go, "Oh, well, nothing happened." Yes, it is. It's a seed that's cracked. The shoot is coming out. New roots are taking place. There's a revolution coming, but it's a revolution of consciousness. Of people saying, I don't need to be governed or regulated so much anymore. When every country is trying to get more and more people to toe the line by retinal observation, by fingerprint scans, by ID cards, more and more people are going to be going, do I actually need this? I know who I am. And as I said on Monday night, the consciousness leap that I'm talking about isn't something that's going to radically change everything overnight. But it is going to bring in, within a year or two, a slow but gradual enhancement of our own individual sensitivity and sensuality, to the point where within a year or two from now, no one's going to be able to walk into a room carrying a bomb or a knife or a gun and harbouring an intent without most people, if not all, going, oh, wait a minute, something's off about that one there. And it'll be clear because people will sense it. There's an acceleration of sensuality and an acceleration of intuitive capacity. And this is not a linear curve, it's an exponential one. And it's happening right now. Talking with a couple of friends earlier today who remember me when I was 20 or younger. I've got one or two friends who remember me that long ago. I'm very fortunate. And we're just saying, yeah, isn't it impressive how we're still pretty active, still physically capable, but we've got all the wisdom of 50 years. They say that age weathers you. And it does, of course it does. You know, bits don't work so well anymore. You get slower, your hair falls out. But hey, it's a trade-off for experience and, dare I say it, wisdom. And also, the older you get, the more you have to live with your own conscience. So again, words like dignity, integrity and authenticity become more and more important, unless you're someone who's content to say, yeah, I still want to sort of have power over people. I still want to make loads of money, even if it means walking on people. I want to have sex with as many people as possible. You know, power. It's not about being powerful. It's about being power-filled, flowing through you as a conduit rather than controlling it, because otherwise it spirals downwards and you become ever more corrupt. And that is the antithesis of a breakthrough as opposed to the breakdown that I'm suggesting we're on the cusp of. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to old Clash songs, and then I'm going to play Born to Run, and then I'm going to play some classic Patti Smith, and I'm going to dance and smile and laugh, and I'm going to find the joy of just being alive at this time. What a great time to be alive. And I'm sure that many of you are suffering in many different ways. And there's nothing I can say to make that any easier for you except to remind you. You are responsible for your actions. You are not responsible for other people's reactions. And if you are acting with a clean conscience when you say or do things, then whatever anyone else says or does is up to them. We are entering a time where guilt and shame and fear are going to be consigned to the adolescence of our human maturity. and not a moment too soon. Catch you later, world. Bye.